At the age of 7, Charlotte's family moved from the United States to China. Known throughout China as Aihua, meaning Love China, Charlotte is a bilingual performer who is instantly recognizable for her fluent Mandarin. Today, Charlotte McInnes gives her version of the Chinese dream. Hello and welcome to the special edition of Up Close. I'm here at the Four Seasons Hotel in Beijing where I'm about to talk with Charlotte McInnes, who is known famously throughout China as Aihua, which means Love China. Charlotte, it's so great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here.
Of course, you are no stranger to me or to CCTV or to the rest of China. I mean, underneath this very American look is somebody who is entrenched in Chinese culture, entrenched in Chinese history. You lived in China. You lived in China for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And that comes as a surprise to many people, well, outside of China.
I think so. I think, you know, when my family moved here in the 80s, we were sort of part of the first wave of foreign families to come into China post-79 and the opening up of China. Mm. So I think now, you know, you see all sorts of little kids and they speak perfect Chinese and, you know, they're from all over the world and it's not really I mean, it's not surprising, it's not shocking, but back then, it was new.
It was novel.
It was something new. It was something new.
And you've been on Chinese television for 20 years, since you were 10, over 20 years.
Yeah.
So what do people say to you when they see you on the street?
It's interesting, you know, I still to this day get, wow, your Chinese is so good, which is it's so flat. It's always very flattering. You know, I have had so many people say to me, doesn't that get tiring, you know?
Right.
But it doesn't, because it's a, you know, a genuine, honest compliment, and it's really sweet. Although you'd think that after so long, maybe people would get past the fact that you speak Chinese.
And you grew up all your life speaking Chinese.
Exactly. Right? But then the other comment I get a lot is, well, it's like you're half Chinese. They'll say, oh, 你是半个中国人, even though I don't have any Chinese.
Right. And would you agree? DNA. Would you say you're half Chinese, or would you say that you're even more?
At least. I mean, at this point, you know, I've been here long enough that I think everything is sort of all mixed together, and I really couldn't tell you what part of me is American, what part of me is Chinese, or what part of me is neither. Mm-hmm.
So now, for those of our viewers who don't know, again, you're very popular at CCTV. You've been on many different programs throughout China, not only on CCTV, but other channels throughout the nation. But for our viewers who don't know, Charlotte has been on television in China since you were 10. You're known as one of the first bilingual Western faces that graced Chinese televisions. So tell me, what was that like the first time that, you know, you were 10? You came onto the television screens. I mean, did you know what was happening at that point in time?
Not at all. Not at all.
What do you remember of that?
I remember the smell of the costumes.
Interesting. What did it smell like?
Interesting? It kind of smelled like a little dusty.
Musty.
A little musty. They were silk. My sister and I were doing some snippets of Chinese opera that we had just started studying. It was really quite amazing that we actually managed to get on the variety show we did, because at the time we had just started learning Chinese opera, more as a sort of extracurricular activity than, I mean, we had no motive in learning it. But our singing teacher was part of a song and dance troupe for kids in Nanjing that is very well known. And so she knew everyone at the TV station. And so she, you know, through her connections, we managed to, you know, get on this show. And I was really nervous because my sister and I, we'd never even, you know, thought of that.
What were you nervous? Were you nervous about singing Chinese opera, or just being on TV?
Just being on TV. The everything. You know, the makeup, the lights, the audience, the everything.
It's overwhelming,
you know? Especially for a 10-year-old, right. You know. And so we had borrowed costumes, and they had been worn before, you know, because they were quite fancy costumes. It's not just a one-time thing.
Right.
So they had this particular smell, and I remember that smell, and it was like a musty makeup, you know, from powder and stuff falling on it. It was an incredible smell. And I remember as my sister and I went through our routine at the end, I can remember thinking to myself, I'd gotten over my nerves, and I can remember thinking to myself, wow, now I've been on TV and I probably won't be on TV again, so I should enjoy, this like first and last sort of performance.
You thought that.
Yeah.
And little did you know.
Little did I know.
There would be thousands of opportunities later.
Yeah.
It basically made you and your sister, we can't forget your sister, Mika, that she was part of this pair that was presented to the Chinese people. What do you think you represented to the Chinese people at that time? Oh. The two of you. Two beautiful Western faces in Chinese costumes.
That were interested in Chinese culture. That up until that point, I think, maybe no one here had necessarily thought that Chinese culture could be attractive to someone from the outside. Because for a long time it was, oh, the United States this, or oh, Europe that. And it was always sort of looking outside China to to developed countries. And here, these two little white kids, essentially, came and were speaking Chinese and doing not such a great job at trying to perform, traditional,
right? So endearing.
Chinese things, performances. And I think that was
the message, the feel from that.
Yeah.
What about in your daily lives at that time? Because I'm sure that was very different. You had to learn to assimilate and adapt to, your surroundings.
Very, very.
How did you feel? What did you feel at that time?
Well, when we moved to China, we lived in Nanjing. We weren't in Beijing. And Nanjing at that time didn't have an international school. There were, I think, literally a handful of foreign families, 2 or 3 actually. Really, there were very, very few foreign children.
And you were 7 at that time.
I was 7 when we first came. And I think, when you're that young, you adapt so quickly to new things that it sort of was just roll with the punches. Okay, so you have to squeeze on the bus. Okay, so you squeeze on the bus. You have one place you can go buy your shoes, so that's where you go buy your shoes.
Right. I have a little girl who's 5, and I can sense that she's very sensitive to her surroundings and who her friends are, and if her friends like her. Was that difficult for you? It
was. We had my sister and I, we got here and we studied Chinese intensively with a tutor for about 5 months, and we started Chinese school second semester of 1989. So after Spring Festival break, we started going to Chinese school, and it was mostly just for language purposes, because we also did homeschooling, English or American homeschooling at home in the afternoons. But I can remember, you don't learn that much in 4 or 5 months. So getting to school, not really being able to communicate with your classmates. For a lot of them, it was their first time seeing a Chinese-looking kid.
There must have been a lot of curiosity.
It was huge curiosity. And back then, I was really blonde.
Hair,
yeah,
right?
I was really blonde when I was a kid. So it was this well, you have golden hair. Wow, your hair's golden. And, sort of things like that I think was interesting also for me as a child to think about the fact that, things were different, and I was different. I was sort of an anomaly. And initially it was fine, and then as we got into sort of upper grades, like 5th, 6th grade, there was some tension between, if kids were too nice to us, then other kids would be like, oh, you're trying to be friends with the foreign kids.
Right.
There was some tension there. And for a few years, it wasn't easy, because we were 2 foreign kids in a school of over 1,000 Chinese students.
Right. All right, well, when we come back, we're going to hear more from Charlotte McInnes, Aihua. Stay tuned. At the age of 7, Charlotte's family moved from the United States to China. Known throughout China as Aihua, meaning Love China, Charlotte is a bilingual performer who is instantly recognizable for her fluent Mandarin. Today, Charlotte McInnes gives her version of the Chinese dream. And welcome back to Up Close, where I'm talking with Charlotte McGinnis, also known as Aihua in China. Well, Charlotte, right before the break, we started talking about your family, your parents, your mother, because this love for China actually did not begin with your generation. It began
with my
3
grandfather.
generations before, right? With your grandfather.
With my grandfather. He first came to China in I believe it was 1940. He was a student in university and went to Japan for some kind of teaching conference or student exchange conference, and got to Japan and just wanted to come to China. It was just this thing for him, and so he I think sent a telegram to his father and said, you know, I've got the time. I really want to go to China, and his father said, well, you know, go ahead. And so he first came then, and of course that was during, there was quite a bit going on in China at the time with the Sino-Japanese War.
Of course. And he was a part of the Flying Tigers.
Well, he came to China, got totally fascinated with China, went back to the States, finished university, and joined the Army to find a way to come back. And so he did an intensive language study and got put in with the Flying Tigers. He wasn't a pilot, but he was posted here under the Flying Tigers.
And from what I hear, even later on in his senior age, he came back to teach.
Oh, he was back and forth all the time. He was just, I mean, in the best way, he was obsessed with China. And he was his most energetic and happy and just beaming when he was here.
So when did you begin to understand, like, this importance of, I mean, literally, you may be Western, but you have Chinese blood coursing through your veins somehow, you know, starting with your grandfather. When did you, and how did you start beginning to understand this, kind of this family connection?
I think when I went back to the States to do my undergrad studies was when I first really realized that I had absorbed a lot of China that I hadn't necessarily been aware of up until that point, because I hadn't lived in the States since I was 7, and then I went straight back to go to university. And so I spent 4 years at university sort of balancing that and figuring it out. And then after I graduated, not long thereafter, I came back to China.
Did you fit in the university, in undergraduate?
Yeah, I guess.
So it was easy to go back and...
It wasn't easy, but I didn't intend it this way, but it just so happened that most of my good friends all had international backgrounds. Okay. So I think they were more accepting of the fact that, you know, here was this Caucasian American who wasn't really American in that sense.
Right.
And they were just very sort of accepting.
You had a shared experience from all over the world, right?
Yeah. So that was good. And then I came back, and it was really after I came back because that was my decision. You know, moving to China wasn't my decision.
Right. When you were 7, you had no choice.
No.
Right.
And staying here and growing up here through the end of high school, that wasn't my choice either. Even though it was fine, it still wasn't my choice. Coming back was a very conscious decision.
So could you say that that was when you finally said, okay, China is my home? This is where I belong? Do you feel that way?
Yes, but that then I think didn't really begin to develop until after I got back and started making a lot of Chinese friends, working on Chinese television shows with Chinese, you know, directors and producers and crews and everything, and really sort of getting my own life here. That's when I think it really started to cement as sort of really part of me.
Right. So when it comes to your career, when it comes to performing, entertaining as an actress, you were trained, you know, you went to school in Columbia in theater arts. But would you consider yourself more of a Western type of actor or a Chinese type? In terms of your style, how would you describe your style?
Maybe a bit of both.
Okay.
I mean, I think there are things that...
a true hybrid.
Well, yeah, because my sister and I had all that training as kids and performing here in China on TV. That was really our foundation. And then when I went back to New York to Columbia, I was really anxious to get some Western training. I was interested in getting some Western training. And then in that, I then realized how much the Chinese training was part of me. And so it's sort of, I think it's a mix. Although I have to say, I think probably Americans would say my style might be more Chinese.
Why?
A little more reserved,
Okay.
a little more, I think reserved is maybe the best way to put it. But then I think a lot of my Chinese friends and fans and etc. might say, well, you're so American, you know,
Right.
your facial expressions, your, you know, the way you speak, blah, 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 you know, it's not Chinese at all.
So given your background and your experience, has it been a challenge to find the roles that you feel truly suit you?
It has. You know, when I first came back, I hadn't really thought about going into hosting or doing MC work. I was still quite focused on doing acting. And I found, because this was 2002, 2003, I found that a lot of the roles that were out there for a Caucasian girl were mostly sort of the token foreigner, you know, in the series, in the film, in the whatever.
Maybe a love interest on the
Yeah,
side.
but it was all very shallow and just very stereotypical. Understandably, you know, but it was disappointing. And for the most part, they were always like, well, you know, you can't speak good Chinese if you play this role. You're going to need to, you know,
need to have the broken Chinese.
work it out and et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, oh, you know, that's kind of difficult.
Or maybe you didn't even want to do that. I mean, that's not you, right? It's
No.
not for a role, right?
No. And so that I did do some acting, and then randomly, just by chance, got into hosting, and that seemed to be a much better fit because the shows I was working on were all sort of at least bicultural, if not, you know, multicultural, and I really felt much more comfortable there because I myself didn't feel, you know, unicultural.
Right.
I felt at least bicultural.
Right.
But I have to say, I think the best sort of, or maybe the most interesting or fun role I've acted so far was in Jackie Chan's recent film.
That was recent, right?
Yes, it was a very small part, but it was fun because he was very encouraging to have me speak English and Mandarin and sort of mix them up and not worry about, you know, staying consistent with one language or the other.
And so, kind of breaking the stereotype.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun.
Okay, well, when we come back, we're going to hear more from Charlotte MacInnes. Stay with us. At the age of 7, Charlotte's family moved from the United States to China. Known throughout China as Aihua, meaning Love China, Charlotte is a bilingual performer who is instantly recognizable for her fluent Mandarin. Today, Charlotte MacInnes gives her version of the Chinese dream. And welcome back to Up Close, where I'm talking with Charlotte MacInnes, also known as Aihua in China. Charlotte, this year there has been a lot of talk about this concept that's been put forth called the China Dream, 中国梦, China Dream, Chinese Dream, however you might want to call it. You've been one of those few Westerners who, I mean, you've basically grown up in China, but you also have this very unique perspective on what's going on. How would you define, or how would you kind of describe what you think this China Dream, Chinese Dream might be?
I think maybe, at least for me anyway, from my interpretation, I think it's the concept of having the opportunity to do things and experience things that maybe before wouldn't have been possible.
Compared to when you were here, when you were a child, I mean, I know memories of when you were a child sometimes, you know, are a bit vague as well. How would you describe, I mean, what's happened in the last 20, 30 years, you know?
I can remember walking to school, second grade, first year we got here, wanting to buy off a street vendor a deep-fried dough ball called ma tuan, you know, with sesame seeds on the outside, and inside was either red bean paste or just white sugar. And really wanting to buy one, but I didn't have any ration tickets. back then, they were still using ration tickets with rice.
And so you were using ration tickets
Well,
in your family as well?
No, because we didn't have a work unit, so we weren't in the quota. So we didn't
So
have
you
that.
couldn't ever have this
I can
one.
remember seeing them on my way to school and thinking, oh, I want one. And maybe my friend, Chinese friends we walked with to school would buy one and give us a bite, or share, things like
sweet.
that. And I remember a few times they actually used their ration tickets and bought me one because they knew how much I absolutely loved these batuan. But, that was 1988. That was 1989. Where, at least in Nanjing, ration tickets were still...
That was not long ago.
No, It wasn't. And now, boy, you have a craving for anything, be it Chinese or American or French or German or whatever. You can find it. And, that's obviously one small side of things, but I think that is a great...
It's a good illustration of what could have been the
Exactly.
dream, right?
Exactly, and the change,
Right.
the vast change.
The
that's happened.
variety, the accessibility that people now have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about for you personally? Back you talked about when you were 10, the first time on television, and you left that scene and you said, "Oh, this may be the only time." Did you ever think, what was that dream for you? Did you?
As a kid, I didn't really fit that into anything. My parents were really good about that. They didn't put a lot of pressure on us with regards to pursuing anything TV related. It was just, if you want to do it, if you enjoy it, great. If not, that's fine. I always had this sort of wondering thought in my head of, if I wasn't a foreigner, and if I didn't speak Chinese, would I be doing this?
Right.
And can I continue to do this? Once that is no longer really part of the equation, is it still possible? And it is.
At the same time, it must be a little bit more difficult. There are a lot more, as we said, a lot more foreigners now in China. They speak impeccable Chinese. They're doing crosstalk on television. They're on the variety shows. Does it become competitive? How do you feel about that sort of competition?
Well,
But they don't have that long history that
yeah, I
you might
think
have.
I'm fortunate in that regard, just because I didn't come to China to sort of make my fortune or with a specific goal. It's always just been part of who I am. I think there's healthy competition, and I think for the most part, everyone's friends with everyone within the circles of foreigners performing on Chinese TV and everything. And it's good. I mean, to a certain extent, we're spokespeople or we're ambassadors or we're representatives of the places we come from. For me, anyway, I think that's an important role to play. And I always, I don't know, I always try to sort of keep it positive, because for me, anyway, that's sort of more my goal than where can I get with my hosting or where can I get with my acting and everything. It's more, what can I do, so to speak.
For the viewers at home, we've worked a lot together. I've known Charlotte for quite a while, and I have to say you're the most undiva-like any celebrity that I've ever met. Where do you think that comes from?
I don't know.
Is it, I kind of feel like if you were in the U.S. with the same sort of celebrity status and had grown up in the U.S., maybe you would be totally different. Maybe you would be that. I don't know. Maybe you would be more diva. But
maybe
or maybe you, it's.
I don't know. I don't know. I think, growing up, our teachers were all very strict with us. Our various Chinese tutors, our singing teacher, our math teacher, everyone was very strict. And no one was very ego-stroking at all. It was always, well, this isn't good enough. Your fours are ugly. That's why you got a bad grade. You don't write your fours properly. Or, you really aren't that good at singing.
Hard to come by.
Yeah, you really aren't that good at singing, so you need to work harder. And if you were a Chinese kid, you would have been out of here a long time ago. Like, really, not brutal and not harmful in any way, but very direct, Very frank, very strict. You know, a line from a famous, I guess, poem it comes to mind with that. It's from the Desiderata. And there's a line in that, something about being humble and listening to others, for always there will be greater and lesser people than yourself. And that's true.
It's a beautiful words to live by.
Yeah, that's true.
So your grandfather, I know, he's passed on, but he was a person who, I guess, started this Chinese interest, planted the seeds of a Chinese life for his kids and also his grandkids. What do you think he would have to say about, you know, your Chinese dream? Do you think this was part of his Chinese dream?
I think so. I think just the fact that when we moved here in 1988, that was already just incredible for him, and a continuation of his Chinese dream. And he was here in 2002, 2003, volunteering in Wuishan, down in Fujian province. And Fujian is where he was based when he was with the military, but then also later in subsequent years when he came back to teach English. So he volunteered as an English teacher at the age of 82, 83, and taught over 200 students that year, and was just as happy as can be. Just as happy as can be. And he had a very adventuresome spirit. He was always ready for adventure, and totally just not afraid of anything. Nothing fazed him. He was always just like, you know, go get it kind of thing. And he was always very proud of us. Bless his heart. He was always so proud of all of his grandkids. I think wherever he is now, I think he's pretty...
And I bet he's probably looking forward to a fourth generation.
I'm sure he is.
But we're not going to go there in this interview. Maybe next time. All right, Charlotte, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And thanks to our viewers at home for tuning in with us this week. We'll see you next week on Up Close. Bye for now.